6 strangest and rarest birds on Earth you won't believe actually exist. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Discovery Fact. Dear viewers, have you ever seen a bird where your first reaction wasn't, "Wow, that's beautiful," but instead, "Wait a minute, is that thing really a bird?" Why am I asking that? Because in the natural world, there are creatures so beautiful that they look as if they were painstakingly created by an artist. But there are also species that make you rub your eyes a few times before you can actually believe you're looking at a real living creature. A head covered in dazzling colors like a rainbow. A gigantic bill with a bizarre structure. A bird that can navigate through darkness using echolocation. And then there are species with such strange crests that they look almost like creatures from another planet. Even more astonishing, there is one species capable of remaining completely motionless like a wooden statue. Unless you look very carefully, you could walk right past it without ever realizing it was there. What's especially fascinating is that some of the species on today's list are also deeply connected to ancient human cultures and religious beliefs. Some were once believed to be messengers between humans and the gods. Others were hunted for their body parts, which were used as ornaments and jewelry. And some species are now facing increasing pressure as their natural habitats continue to shrink. But remember, nature doesn't need computer-generated special effects to create things that leave us speechless. All we have to do is look a little closer at the remote forests and wild places across our planet, and we'll discover that reality can sometimes be stranger than imagination itself. So, which birds have such bizarre appearances and behaviors that they're almost impossible to believe? Right now, let's join Discovery Fact as we step into the world of these winged oddities and uncover their incredible stories, one species at a time. Are you ready? If so, let's begin with a bird that was once regarded by the Maya as a symbol of royalty and was even believed to be a messenger carrying messages between humans and the gods. And that bird is king vulture, the scavenger bird with the face of a god. If you only hear the name king vulture, you might immediately imagine a gigantic, fierce bird soaring through the sky in search of animal carcasses. But when you actually see one with your own eyes, you might be surprised. Because you know what? The king vulture doesn't have the dull gray or brown appearance commonly associated with many other vulture species. On the contrary, it is one of the most striking-looking vultures in the world. Its body is primarily white, while its wings and tail are black, creating a dramatic contrast. But what captures people's attention the most is its head. The head and neck of the king vulture are almost completely featherless, revealing skin covered in striking patches of color, including red, orange, yellow, and various other shades. From a distance, that face can sometimes make you feel as if you're looking at a creature created for a fantasy movie. But it's all real. And behind that bizarre appearance is a bird that plays a very important role in the ecosystem. The king vulture is a scavenger. In simple terms, its job isn't exactly what you would call glamorous, but it is absolutely essential. When an animal dies in the wild, its carcass can become a source of harmful bacteria and contribute to the spread of disease if it is left to decompose without being removed. Scavengers such as vultures help quickly remove this organic material from the environment. So, while humans might feel rather uneasy when they see a flock of vultures feeding on a carcass, in nature, these birds are more like the specialized sanitation workers of the rainforest. But that's not all. Another fascinating thing about king vultures is their ability to take advantage of rising air currents and glide for long periods without constantly flapping their wings. This allows them to conserve a significant amount of energy while searching for food. When they discover a food source, smaller vulture species sometimes have to give way to this king. But why is it called the king vulture? The answer goes beyond its position at the dinner table of a carcass. King vultures are found primarily throughout Central and South America. And in ancient Maya culture, images of this bird appeared in various records and symbolic representations. The Maya once regarded the king vulture as a symbol of royalty and associated it with the role of a messenger between humans and the gods. This is precisely what makes it so fascinating that a bird associated with eating the dead could hold such a special place in the beliefs of an ancient civilization. On one side, there is the image of death. On the other, there is a symbol of power and the divine. That contrast is truly fascinating, isn't it? However, Behind that royal appearance lies a worrying reality. The king vulture's habitat is being affected by changes and habitat loss, placing increasing pressure on wild populations. In captivity, these birds can live for around 30 years, but in the wild, their future depends heavily on whether humans can protect the forests where they live. If the king vulture surprised you with its colorful face, then the next bird will capture our attention with something even harder to believe, a gigantic bill paired with a bizarre helmet on its head. Let's venture deeper into the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, where a true king of the ancient forest is about to appear. And that bird is Hornbill, the king of the ancient forest with a bill that makes everyone look twice. If there were a competition for birds whose appearance makes people turn around and take a second look, the great hornbill would definitely be a strong contender. This bird's scientific name is Buceros bicornis. It belongs to the hornbill family and is one of the largest hornbill species in the world. An adult can weigh up to around 8.8 pounds, with a body length of approximately 3 to 4 feet, while its wingspan can reach about 5.2 feet. Just hearing those numbers is enough to imagine that this isn't exactly the tiny little bird you might normally see in your backyard, right? But its size still isn't the most remarkable thing. What truly makes the great hornbill stand out is its enormous bill. The bill is long, curved, and highly distinctive. On top of it sits a hollow structure that looks almost like a helmet. This entire structure is made primarily of keratin, the same type of protein found in human hair and fingernails. Its yellow and orange-yellow coloring makes the bill incredibly eye-catching. But here's what makes it even more interesting. To this day, the exact primary function of this hollow helmet is still not completely understood. One well-supported hypothesis suggests that this structure may play a role in attracting mates and communicating between individuals. In other words, it seems that nature decided to equip the great hornbill with a rather elaborate accessory. And that's not all. Their eyes also differ between males and females. Adult males typically have red or orange irises, while females have white pupils with turquoise or pale blue colored eyes. When they are young, great hornbills have gray plumage that gradually changes as they mature. The rear part of the body and the tail are particularly striking, featuring white feathers mixed with glossy black patches. With such a distinctive appearance, it's easy to understand why great hornbills have held an important place in the cultures of many indigenous communities. In some regions, they have been regarded as valuable birds associated with power and ceremonial traditions. Their feathers and bills were once used to make ornaments, jewelry, and traditional objects. In particular, the Nishi people of the Pake region once used the upper portion of the great hornbill's bill to make part of a traditional headdress known as the pudum. However, this story also reveals a darker side of what can happen when humans become too fascinated with a particular animal. As demand for their bills, feathers, and meat increased, hunting became a serious threat. At the same time, the tropical forests where great hornbills live have continued to shrink as a result of human activities. Fortunately, attitudes toward conservation have changed. Today, the Nishi people have shifted to alternative materials such as fiberglass to create the bill-shaped part of their traditional headdresses rather than using real bird bills. It may seem like a small change, but it carries enormous significance. Because sometimes protecting an animal doesn't mean that people have to completely abandon their traditions. We simply need to find another way to keep those traditions alive without having to sacrifice the lives of wild animals. The great hornbill, therefore, is more than just a beautiful and unusual bird. It is also a story about culture, nature, and the relationship between humans and the wild world. But if the great hornbill's enormous bill seems strange to you, just wait until you see the next species. Because we're about to enter a completely different world. Pitch-black caves where thousands of birds gather together and produce sounds so intense that you might feel like covering your ears and running away. And the next creature is Oil bird, the bird that lives in darkness and calls like a talking cave. After witnessing the great hornbill's enormous bill, you might be thinking that nature has run out of ways to surprise us. But not so fast. Because right now, we're leaving the bright forest canopy behind and entering a completely different world. Dark, damp, and seemingly endless caves, where a remarkable bird spends much of its time resting. What's even more incredible is that in this almost complete darkness, they can still find their way using echolocation. Yes, we're talking about the oilbird, also known as the oilbird. The oilbird is a nocturnal bird that primarily feeds on fruit and commonly roosts in caves. Its most remarkable feature is its ability to navigate using sound, a mechanism that immediately reminds people of bats. When flying through dark environments, oilbirds produce high-frequency sounds and then use the returning echoes to detect obstacles around them. But unlike bats, the sounds produced by oilbirds fall within the range that humans can hear. And this is where the story starts to get pretty noisy. Imagine walking into a pitch-black cave. No light, no clear path. Then, from somewhere deep inside, you suddenly hear continuous calls echoing through the darkness. One bird would be enough to get your attention, but if there were thousands of oilbirds gathered inside, the resulting echo would definitely not be an experience for anyone who enjoys peace and quiet, would it? And when you're close to them, their calls can be extremely loud, reaching around 100 decibels, according to observations reported in studies and literature about the species. Simply put, if you're hoping to find a quiet place to relax, an oilbird cave probably wouldn't be your ideal destination. What's fascinating is that the oilbird's ability to navigate using echolocation appears to be particularly important when it is inside caves, where virtually no light is available. When they leave the caves at night to search for food, however, they do not rely on this mechanism in quite the same way. Research into their navigation abilities has also shown that this system is not perfect. In one experiment, oilbirds were able to collide with small obstacles but successfully avoided larger ones. This suggests that echolocation helps them navigate, but it is not a perfect radar system as many people might imagine. When it comes to food, oilbirds have a rather unusual diet. They primarily eat fruit, including the fruits of certain palm species and other tropical plants. In particular, oilbirds are considered one of the best-known nocturnal fruit-eating birds, and they play an important role in helping disperse seeds throughout forest ecosystems. The name oilbird also has a rather interesting origin. In the past, people hunted oilbird chicks because their bodies contained large amounts of fat, which was then extracted and used as fuel. Today, however, what makes this species truly memorable is its remarkable adaptation to life in dark environments. The oilbird was documented by the naturalist Alexander von Humboldt during his explorations in South America. From a bird living in caves that might seem unremarkable at first glance, it has become a fascinating example of how evolution can produce abilities that we normally associate only with bats or other animals adapted to life in darkness. However, if you think the oilbird is strange enough, don't leave the forest just yet. Because out there, among the dense trees of South America, there is another bird with such a brilliantly orange crest that, at first glance, many people might think it has just stepped out of a science fiction movie. And even more fascinating, behind that beautiful appearance is an incredibly bizarre courtship performance. Let's take a closer look at Cocks of the Rock, the strange dancers of the South American rainforest. If you thought that after the oilbird we had already reached the limit of weirdness, then you might want to prepare yourself for another surprise. Because as we leave those dark caves behind and return to the vast rainforests of South America, we're about to encounter a bird whose appearance can easily make you think of a creature from another planet. This is the Cocks of the Rock, a group of birds belonging to the genus Rupicola. From the very first glance, the features that immediately stand out are their vivid colors and the distinctive crest on their heads. They live in tropical and subtropical rainforests throughout South America, where dense canopies create a green world that feels almost completely isolated from the outside. But among all that endless green, the males stand out like flashes of fire. They have brilliantly colored plumage, while on top of their heads sits a large crest-shaped, almost like a crescent moon. And this is precisely what makes them look so unlike the ordinary birds we're used to seeing. However, there is something quite interesting about them. Only the males have this remarkable crest. In the natural world, appearance isn't always simply about looking good. For Cocks of the Rock, the crest plays an important role in attracting mates. The males have to display their appearance, posture, and behavior in order to impress the females. But simply standing there and showing off their crest definitely isn't enough, because these birds are also famous for their extremely elaborate courtship performances. In areas known as courtship arenas, multiple males may gather together. They display their bodies, produce various sounds, and perform characteristic movements designed to attract the female's attention. From a distance, the scene might look like a bizarre stage hidden deep inside the rainforest. On one side are the male birds, each trying to prove that he is the most impressive. On the other are the females, watching and making their choices. And of course, in this competition, it's not always just about dancing and striking poses. The males are territorial and can be quite aggressive. When competing with one another, they may engage in confrontations to claim a position or gain an advantage. To put it humorously, it's basically one stage, but a whole crowd of performers. But what makes the story of the Cocks of the Rock even more fascinating is what happens after mating. Once mating is successfully completed, the male plays almost no major role in raising the offspring. Most of the remaining work falls to the female. The female builds the nest on rock faces or other suitable rocky locations, then incubates the eggs and cares for the chicks on her own. Meanwhile, the males continue gathering in their own areas where they can compete with one another and sometimes even fight. From a human perspective, you could say that the family life of these birds is rather unusual. But that is simply how nature works. Outside the breeding season, Cocks of the Rock are generally very cautious and can be difficult to observe. They hide within the rainforest canopy, where their brightly colored plumage, which might seem easy to spot, can actually disappear among the complex patterns of light and shadow created by the forest. Their diet consists mainly of fruits and berries. And here is an important role that many people may overlook. As they eat fruit and move through the forest, they help disperse seeds, allowing many plant species to continue growing. So behind their bizarre appearance, their competitive performances, and that crest that looks like it came straight out of a science fiction movie, Cocks of the Rock are still an important link in the ecosystem of the South American rainforest. Greater Lofarina, with a blue crown and one of the strangest courtship displays in the bird world. Leaving the forests of South America behind, we now fly thousands of miles away to a completely different part of the world, where the rainforests of New Guinea and Indonesia still hide countless mysteries. And here we're going to encounter a bird that isn't particularly large, measuring only about 9.8 inches in length. But it possesses a performance that is almost impossible to look away from. This is the Greater Lofarina, a member of the bird of paradise family, scientifically known as Lofarina superba. At first glance, you might think it's simply a small bird covered in black feathers. But wait until the male begins his performance. Under normal circumstances, its body is covered in sleek black plumage, allowing it to blend relatively discreetly into the forest canopy. Yet on its head sits a distinctive crown, while its chest is covered with shimmering blue feathers. And when breeding season arrives, these features that might seem ordinary at first suddenly become important tools for attracting females. This is also when we get to witness one of the strangest courtship displays in the entire bird world. A male Greater Lofarina doesn't simply fly in front of a female and wait. No, it has to perform. The male can raise and spread specialized feathers on its body, transforming its silhouette into an almost semicircular black structure, while the iridescent blue feathers on its chest stand out right in the center. When viewed from the front, its appearance changes completely. A small bird standing in the middle of the forest suddenly transforms into a bizarre face with two striking blue eyes. But what makes this performance so fascinating isn't just its unusual appearance. The male also performs a sequence of relatively complex movements, combining body motions and sounds to capture the female's attention. Simply put, it's like a performance in which the artist has to know how to dance, how to pose, and even how to choose the perfect angle to make an impression. And of course, putting on an impressive performance doesn't guarantee that the male will be chosen. One reason competition among males can become so intense is the relatively low number of females, forcing many males to compete for the opportunity to mate. This pressure to attract mates contributes to the development of unusual physical and behavioral traits in the males. It is a very clear example of how sexual selection can produce extraordinary characteristics in nature. But think about this for a moment. Why would nature require such an elaborate performance? The answer lies in the basic rules of survival. With every generation, males whose traits attract more attention from females have a greater chance of passing their genes on to the next generation. Over long periods of time, those traits can become increasingly pronounced. And the result is a Greater Lofarina with plumage, a crown, and a performance so extraordinary that if you saw it for the first time in a video, you might think the footage had been digitally edited. But there's absolutely no Photoshop involved. This is simply a product of nature. What's remarkable is that the greater Lopharina isn't a gigantic bird, nor does it possess any terrifying strength. It is only about the length of a handspan, yet its small size doesn't stop it from becoming one of the most impressive performers in the bird world. You see, the more we learn, the more we realize that nature has countless different ways for living creatures to reproduce and ensure the survival of their species. Some species compete through strength, some rely on color, some depend on song, and the greater Lopharina? It builds an entire stage right in the middle of the forest. Pretty fascinating, isn't it? Po2, the wooden statue that suddenly opens its eyes in the forest. Hey, let me ask you something. If you happened to be walking through a tropical forest at night and saw what appeared to be a dry, motionless branch standing right in front of you, would you ever think it was watching you? Probably not, right? So why am I so sure? Because that is exactly what makes the Po2 one of the strangest birds we've discovered so far. You see, the Po2 has such an extraordinary ability to camouflage itself that if you didn't already know it was there, you could walk right past it without ever realizing that a living creature was perched on that branch. The story of this bird once attracted attention when a woman in Colombia and her family visited a farm in Chibolo in northern Magdalena. There, they suddenly noticed an object that looked like a wooden statue. But then the object opened its eyes. It turned out that what they had mistaken for a piece of wood was actually a Po2, standing completely motionless. When the bird noticed people approaching, it became alert and raised its feathers. And that wasn't all. It suddenly opened its wide mouth and let out a call that startled the woman. This is one of the things that makes the Po2 so fascinating. Po2s are primarily found throughout Central and South America, including the vast tropical forests of the Amazon. In Brazil, local people also call them urutau. They are primarily nocturnal. During the day, instead of constantly flying around like many other birds, Po2s usually find a suitable position on a tree branch and remain completely still. Their feathers have colors and patterns that allow their bodies to blend into tree bark, dead branches, and the surrounding environment. But the Po2's camouflage isn't just about its feathers. When they sense danger, they can use an incredibly simple yet effective strategy. They simply remain motionless. They don't run away. They don't attack. They don't try to confront the threat. They simply stay there and turn themselves into part of the branch. In fact, Po2s can even adjust their posture to make themselves look like a piece of dead wood. That is why many people only notice them when the bird suddenly moves or opens its eyes. Take a close look at a Po2's face and you'll understand why this bird can seem slightly eerie. Its large eyes, wide bill, and distinctive call make it completely different from the image of the cute little bird we normally imagine. The Po2's call can sound quite deep, drawn out, and mournful. In the darkness of a nighttime forest, that sound echoing through the shadows can easily remind listeners of a mournful cry. But in reality, it is simply the way these birds communicate and function within their environment. Po2s also have a rather interesting breeding behavior. They don't build elaborate nests. Instead, the female usually lays a single egg in a small depression on a tree branch or another suitable location on a decaying tree. The egg is white with purplish-brown spots. What makes this especially interesting is that both the male and female take part in incubating the egg and caring for the chick. The incubation period lasts about 30 days, and when we place the Po2 alongside the 5 bird species we've already encountered, we can see that each one has its own unique trick for survival. The king vulture stands out with its colorful face and important role in the ecosystem. The great hornbill amazes us with its enormous bill. The oilbird has adapted to darkness through its ability to navigate using echolocation. The cocks of the rock capture our attention with their distinctive crests and remarkable courtship displays. The greater Lopharina turns its own body into a stage to attract a mate. And the Po2? It chooses to disappear right before our eyes. Perhaps that is the most frightening thing of all. Because in nature, not every creature that may pose a threat needs to growl or charge toward you. Sometimes, the thing that is hardest to notice is the very thing standing right in front of you. And that is exactly what makes the natural world so fascinating. These birds may surprise us, and sometimes even frighten us a little. But they are all real products of evolution and adaptation. No magic is required. No movie special effects. Nature alone is capable of creating creatures so extraordinary that the human imagination can barely keep up. Isn't that amazing? As you can see, our world is home to countless strange and fascinating creatures, and the unusual-looking birds we've explored today are certainly among them. What do you think about these incredible birds? Which one do you think is the strangest of them all? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to give Discovery Fact a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next fascinating discoveries. And now it's time for us to say goodbye. See you in the next adventure.